Our engagement dinner was supposed to be one of the happiest nights of my life, a celebration of love and a glimpse of the future I thought I was stepping into. Instead, it became the moment I realized the man I was about to marry might never truly stand by me. I've always been proud of who I am. Not because of wealth or status, I don't have much of either, but because I chose a career that gave my life meaning. I'm a public school teacher, and even though the paycheck barely stretches to cover rent and bills, I love shaping young minds, watching them grow, and knowing I make a difference. When I met Daniel 2 years ago in a little coffee shop near the university, I thought I'd found someone who admired those values. He was finishing his MBA, talking about changing the world, and I believed him. We seemed aligned, driven by purpose, not material gain. Or at least, that's what I thought. The first warning sign should have been when he suggested introducing me to his parents at Shaw Lorana restaurant, where one appetizer cost more than I usually spent on groceries in a week. I remember saving up every last dollar from my part-time waitressing job just to buy a dress I hoped would blend in. It wasn't designer, but the simple black wrap dress felt elegant enough. His parents arrived in grand fashion, his father in a suit tailored so perfectly it probably cost more than my monthly rent. His mother draped in diamonds that sparkled under the chandeliers. They smiled at me politely, but I knew those smiles. They were the same ones I'd seen from entitled parents during school conferences, the kind that never reached the eyes. Dinner began pleasantly, or at least it seemed that way. His mother asked about my job, though I noticed her expression tighten when I proudly mentioned teaching at Roosevelt Elementary, a Title I school where many of my students lived below the poverty line. His father, however, stayed mostly silent, observing me like I was part of some experiment he was conducting. Their conversations revolved around topics I couldn't contribute much to: their recent trip to the Hamptons, the renovation of their Aspen vacation home, and mutual acquaintances whose names meant nothing to me. When I tried to share a lighthearted story about my student science fair, I could practically feel the interest draining from their faces. And then, during dessert, a $70 chocolate souffle, I couldn't even enjoy. His father finally turned his sharp attention on me. "So," he said, his voice smooth but cutting, "tell me honestly, what exactly do you see in my son?" I blinked, caught off guard. I started to say something about Daniel's kindness, his intelligence, the way he made me laugh. But his father interrupted with a dismissive wave of his hand. No. What do you really see in him? Because from where I sit, this arrangement looks rather convenient. A young teacher with modest means landing a wealthy fiancé. Some people might call that luck. Others might call it calculating. The word landed like a slap. Calculating. The implication couldn't have been clearer. Heat rushed to my cheeks, humiliation burning deep as I noticed other diners turning their heads toward our table. "Dad." Daniel's voice wavered, but he didn't continue. His father leaned back smugly. "Come now, son. Let's be honest. She's attractive, yes, I'll grant her that. But beyond that, what does she bring to the table? A teacher's salary? Student debt? A family that can't even contribute to the wedding?" Every word was precise, a dagger aimed straight at me. I set my fork down carefully, though my hands trembled. My voice somehow came out steady. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I've never asked for anything from your family. I pay my own bills, and I had planned on covering half of our wedding expenses." He laughed, a cold, cruel sound. "How noble. And tell me, what would half a wedding look like on $35,000 a year? A pizza party in a high school gym?" My eyes darted to Daniel, expecting meeting him to defend me, to stand up for me, to prove that he was the partner I thought he was. But he didn't. He just stared at his plate, cheeks flushed not with outrage on my behalf, but with embarrassment over the scene I was supposedly creating. And then came the worst part. A weak, nervous chuckle escaped his lips. He laughed. That laugh hurt more than all of his father's words combined. In that instant, I knew something inside me had broken. The man I thought would protect me, cherish me, then stand by me had chosen silence, and worse, laughter over defending me. His approval-seeking outweighed my dignity. With steady hands, I reached for my engagement ring. The 2-carat diamond, once a symbol of love and promise, now felt like a chain binding me to people who would never truly respect me. I slipped it off and set it down gently beside the untouched dessert. "Thank you for dinner," I said, rising to my feet with as much grace as I could summon. "And thank you for showing me exactly who you are." Without another word, I walked out of that glittering restaurant, leaving behind not only the ring, but also the illusion that this family or this man deserved me. That night, I collapsed on my couch in the same black dress, exhausted but strangely lighter, as if I'd finally exhaled after months of holding my breath. My small apartment didn't feel shabby or inadequate anymore. I felt like freedom. The next morning, as I brewed coffee, a relentless knock rattled my door. I didn't need to check the peephole. I knew it was him. Daniel stood there holding an enormous bouquet of white roses, his face painted with that pitiful, guilty look he wore whenever he disappointed someone. "Please," he begged when I opened the door. "Can we talk?" I let him, and not out of forgiveness, but because I didn't want my neighbors to overhear. He thrust the flowers toward me like a peace offering, his hands trembling. "They're beautiful," I said, setting them on the counter without searching for a vase. "But they don't change anything." He started pacing my tiny living room, words tumbling out in frantic bursts. My father was completely out of line. He had no right to say those things. He doesn't understand us what we have. I crossed my arms, watching him. "What do we have, Daniel?" He stopped, his eyes wide. "Love," he said quickly. "We love each other. That's what matters, right? Not what my father thinks, not what anyone thinks." "Then where was that love last night?" My voice was soft but cutting. "Where was it when your father humiliated me in front of a room full of strangers?" His face crumpled. I was shocked. I didn't know what to do. "Haven't you?" I pressed. "Haven't you noticed the way he looks at me? The way he dismisses my words? Haven't you noticed how you defer to him on everything, where we eat, what we talk about, even what show we watch when they visit? When was the last time you disagreed with him about anything, Daniel? When was the last time you chose what you wanted instead of what would make him proud?" For a moment, I felt my words pierce through. But then he pulled out the velvet ring box, and my stomach sank. "Look," he said, kneeling slightly. "I talked to him this morning. He feels terrible. He wants to take us both to dinner next week to apologize. He'll pay for the wedding, anything you want. We can have it at the country club. Invite all your friends. It'll be perfect." The country club. His father's domain. His family's territory. A wedding designed for their approval, not for our love. I sank onto the couch. "You still don't get it? This isn't about money or venues. It's about respect. It's about you standing up for me when it matters." "I do want to spend my life with you," he whispered, sitting beside me and trying to take my hand. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. Please just put the ring back on. We'll figure this out, will we?" I asked. "Or will you just keep finding new ways to smooth things over, to keep everyone else comfortable while I'm left to swallow the hurt?" Silence. He stared at his shoes, shoulders hunched, finally admitting he controls everything. The trust fund. My job at his company. Even this apartment, it's his. If I defy him completely, I lose it all. And there it was, the truth I had been ignoring for 2 years. He wasn't choosing between me and his father. He was choosing between me and his comfortable, sheltered life. And deep down, I already knew which one he valued more. I understand, I said softly. I do. But I can't marry someone who sees our relationship as a problem to be managed instead of something worth defending. He tried to argue, to explain, to make me see his side. But my decision was already carved in stone. When he finally left, he took the ring with him. And once again, I felt that strange, liberating lightness settle over me. But his absence didn't bring silence for long. Within days, the calls began. The phone calls started 3 days later. At first, they came at odd hours during my lunch break while I graded papers, late at night when I was brushing my teeth, even at 6 in the morning when the world was still dark. Every time his name lit up my screen, I let it ring until voicemail picked it up. The messages began soft, almost pitiful. Apologies mixed with desperate pleas. I love you. Please, just give me another chance. Then came promises, hurried and fragile. I'll stand up to him this time. I'll choose you over everything, I swear. But by the 4th day, frustration crept into his tone. His words sharpened, accusing me of being unreasonable, of punishing him too harshly for something beyond his control. And then there was the message from his mother. Her voice dripped with sweetness, that syrupy politeness I imagined she used during charity galas to coax donations from reluctant board members. Sweetheart, she cooed, I hope you're not letting pride get in the way of your future. My husband can be traditional. He doesn't always mean what he says. You're a smart girl. Surely you can see that some battles just aren't worth fighting. Relationships are about compromise. We all have to give a little. Compromise. As if accepting humiliation was a mature step toward marriage. As if swallowing disrespect was the mark of a wise woman. I was still replaying her words in my head when my principal, Mrs. Davidson, called me into her office that Friday afternoon. She was a seasoned educator in her 60s, sharp, respected, with a reputation for fairness and no patience for nonsense. I admired her deeply. Sit down, she said, closing the door behind me. Her expression was serious, almost protective. I got an unusual phone call this morning. My stomach dropped. A gentleman, he claimed to be concerned about your emotional stability. Suggested you were under stress and might not be fit to be around children. The blood drained from my face. What did you tell him? I told him, she said crisply, that any concerns about a teacher's performance must be submitted in writing through official channels with documented evidence. Funny thing, he couldn't provide a single example. She leaned back, studying me carefully. Now, do you want to explain what this is really about? Something in her voice, firm but kind, broke down the wall I'd been holding up all week. I told her everything. The dinner, the insults, the ring, the breakup, the calls. All of it poured out like a confession. I hadn't realized I needed to make by the time I finished. Mrs. Davidson's expression had darkened with anger. That, she said sharply, is harassment. And not very smart harassment either. I've been observing your teaching for 3 years. Your students adore you. Your test scores are consistently excellent. And you've never once had a behavioral incident. If anything, you're one of our most reliable staff members. Relief washed over me so strongly I almost cried. But underneath it burned something else, anger. It was one thing for his father to insult me in a restaurant. It was another for him to attack my livelihood, to try and sabotage the career I'd fought so hard for. What should I do? I asked quietly, for now. Nothing, she said. But if he or anyone connected to him calls again, I'll forward the details to our legal department. We don't tolerate interference with our staff. Walking home that evening, I carried a strange cocktail of emotions. Vindication because his father's attempt had failed. Sadness because it confirmed the truth I had been avoiding. This family would never accept me. And worse, they would try to destroy me if I didn't bend to their will. That night, I finally sat down and listened to all of Daniel's voicemails. His latest one was especially pathetic, his voice raw with exhaustion. I don't know what else to do. My father says you're being dramatic, that you blew everything out of proportion. Maybe if you just apologize for walking out, we could move past this. Please call me back. Apologize. For leaving a table where I was publicly humiliated. For having the self-respect to walk away when no one else defended me. I deleted every message without replying. Some bridges once burned should stay reduced to ashes. That weekend, my roommate found me on the living room floor, surrounded by a mountain of bridal magazines. I was tearing out glossy pages, venues, gowns, elaborate cakes, and dropping them into a trash bag one by one. Therapeutic destruction? She asked, setting down 2 mugs of coffee. Something like that, I said, ripping through a spread of flower arrangements. I can't believe I wasted so much money on this nonsense. She picked up a page with a model in a sparkling ball gown and studied it. Then she grinned. You know what we should do? Burn them. I looked up, startled. Burn them? My grandmother always said fire cleanses. We can have a little ceremony. Say goodbye to this fake version of your future and make room for something real. An hour later, we were on the rooftop with a fire pit, feeding pages into the flames. It was strangely satisfying watching those glossy dreams curl, blacken, and vanish into smoke. With every page that burned, I felt lighter, like I was reclaiming myself. We stood on the rooftop. My roommate and I, watching the pages of bridal magazines curl and vanish in the fire. Images of ballrooms, designer gowns, and towering wedding cakes turned to ash, floating into the night sky. With every page I fed to the flames, I felt a piece of pressure lifting, as if I was burning away expectations that had never belonged to me in the first place. She glanced over at me, her face lit by the flickering orange glow. Can I ask you something? Sure. Did you ever really want that wedding? The country club receptions, the exotic flowers, all of this. She gestured toward the pile of glossy remnants. I thought about it seriously. I thought I did. But looking back, I think I just wanted to want it. It felt like what I was supposed to dream about, not what I actually wanted. So what do you want? She asked softly. I stared at the fire, the last images dissolving into smoke. I don't know yet. Maybe that's the problem. I've been so busy trying to fit into someone else's vision of my life that I forgot to figure out my own. Her question lingered in my mind long after the fire died down. And later that night, as I lay in bed, I realized there was one person I needed to call. Someone who could always see through the illusions. I wrapped myself in my sister. She lived 3 states away and had only met Daniel twice. But she had an uncanny gift for cutting through pretense. When she picked up, her voice carried the same straightforward sharpness it always did. Finally, she said, I was wondering when you called to tell me you dumped that spineless mama's boy. I laughed despite myself. How did you know? Instagram. You haven't posted a picture with him in weeks. Plus, you sound different, lighter, happier. I told her everything, the dinner, his father's cruel words, Daniel's silence, the breakup, even the humiliating phone calls afterward. She listened patiently, making small noises of disgust at all the right moments. I have to be honest, she said once I'd finished. I never liked him. I kept waiting for you to see what I saw. And what was that? A man who had never learned to stand up to his father. Do you remember that first Christmas you brought him home? Dad teased him about his fancy car, and instead of laughing it off, he launched into this whole justification how it was a graduation gift. how he'd worked hard for it, like he needed our approval to validate owning it. I did remember. At the time, I thought it was sweet that he cared what my family thought. But my sister wasn't done. And then there was the way he deferred to you on everything. Where to eat, what to watch, what to do. At first, I thought it was considerate. Later, I realized it was avoidance. He was terrified of making a decision that might displease someone. I sighed. Why didn't you say anything? Would you have listened? She asked gently. I paused. Probably not. Exactly. Her voice softened. The truth is, you don't need someone who always agrees with you. You need someone who has your back when it matters, even if it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. Her words sank deep. When we hung up, I sat in my small apartment, really seeing it for the first time. The shelves stacked with books I loved, not ones meant to impress anyone. The photos on the walls, moments from trips with friends, not staged memories for social media. The little row of succulents I've nurtured on the windowsill, thriving because I enjoyed watching them grow. This was my life. Maybe modest by some standards, but wholly mine. And for the first time in years, that felt not just enough, but right out 2 weeks passed in blissful silence. Then, one evening, I opened my laptop and froze at the sight of his name in my inbox. The subject line read, "We need to discuss this rationally." The subject line alone made my stomach twist. Against my better judgment, I clicked the email open dot. We need to discuss this rationally. The message was long, but every sentence felt like a slap. I've given you time to cool off, it began, and to think more clearly about the situation. I understand you were upset about dinner with my parents, but your reaction was completely disproportionate. My father was simply being protective of his family, which is natural for any parent. Your dramatic exit embarrassed everyone and caused unnecessary conflict. I've been trying to smooth things over with my family while giving you space, but I'm starting to think you're enjoying the attention. Relationships require compromise. Sometimes that means accepting that not everyone will express themselves the way you'd prefer. My father comes from a different generation with different communication styles. I think we should take a break until you're ready to be more mature about this. My parents have even offered to pay for counseling if that would help you process your feelings constructively. They want to move forward, but that requires effort from both sides. I read it 3 times, disbelief growing each pass. He had twisted the entire story. His father's cruelty was now a different communication style. My self-respect had been recast as a tantrum. His cowardice reframed as patient, reasonable maturity, but the phrase that enraged me most was, "I've spoken with several people about this." He was out there peddling a revised version of events, painting himself as the calm, rational partner and me as the unstable woman who overreacted. I doubted he mentioned his father's attempt to sabotage my job. I started typing responses, first a meticulous rebuttal, then a detailed breakdown of why his father's actions were indefensible, and finally a blunt go to hell. But after staring at the draft for a long time, I closed the laptop without sending a word. An hour later, my roommate found me in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with unnecessary force. "That day?" she asked, eyeing the growing pile of finely minced onions. "Email from the one who dash shall dash not dash be dash named." I muttered. Apparently, I'm dramatic, immature, and should be grateful his father was just being protective. She winced. "Oh, honey, please tell me you're not planning to respond." "I want to," I admitted. "I want to spell out exactly why he's wrong. Why his family operates like some toxic monarchy where everyone bows to the patriarch." "But you won't," she said firmly, taking the knife from my hand. "Because you're smarter than that. People like him don't argue in good faith. You could write the most perfect response in the world, and he'd twist it, dismiss it, or use it as proof that you're still invested. The only way to win is not to play. Her words stung with truth. Engaging with him would give him exactly what he wanted: my attention, my energy, and evidence that I still cared enough to fight. That night, I deleted the email permanently. No drafts, no replies. If he was waiting for an answer, he'd be waiting forever. Some conversations aren't worth having, especially with people who already decided you're wrong before. You've even spoken, so when my phone rang a few days later and I saw an unfamiliar number, I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. It was his mother. Her voice, usually clipped and commanding, sounded different, soft, almost hesitant. I was wondering, she said carefully, if you might meet me for coffee. There's something I'd like to discuss. Every instinct told me to decline. This had to be another trap, another attempt to reel me back on their terms. But curiosity won, and against my better judgment, I agreed. A month later, I was knee-deep in moving boxes when I heard a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I'd just found a small house across town, nothing fancy, but it had a little garden in the back and felt like a clean slate. When I opened the door, there he was. Daniel. He looked different, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes and a nervous energy radiating off him. In his hand, he clutched a crumpled piece of paper like it was a lifeline. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. "Please, I have something to show you." Against my better judgment, I let him in. His eyes swept over the half-packed boxes and he frowned. "You're really leaving?" "Yes," I said simply. "I found a house. It's small, but it has a garden. I've always wanted to grow my own tomatoes." That made him smile, a genuine smile I hadn't seen in months. "You said that on our third date. You wanted to make your own pasta sauce someday." The fact that he remembered caught me off guard. "What's on that paper?" I asked. He handed it to me with trembling hands. It was a letter written his father's distinctive, scrawling script. The words were venomous. "You ungrateful little fool. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? Walking away from the family business to chase some childish fantasy of independence? And for what? For that gold-digging teacher who couldn't even pretend to appreciate our generosity? I built this company over 30 years, and you would throw it all away for someone who will never be worthy of our family? If you think you'll be welcomed back when this juvenile rebellion burns out, you're sorely mistaken." I looked up at Daniel, shocked. "He wrote this 2 days ago," Daniel said, voice low. "When I told him I accepted a job with Morrison Tech downtown. It's a small startup. Nothing glamorous. But it's mine. My work, my decisions. My successes or my failures, mine. You left the family business?" He nodded, running a hand through his hair. "It took weeks to get the courage. But I kept thinking about what you said, that I never chose what I wanted, only what made him proud. You were right. I've spent my whole life chasing his approval, and it was destroying me, destroying us." I felt something stir inside me, not hope exactly, but recognition. This was the man I had fallen in love with once, before his family's shadow swallowed him whole. "I've been seeing a therapist," he added quickly, trying to understand why I let him control everything, why I couldn't stand up for you when it mattered. "She says I have enmeshment issues with my family." "That's a start," I said cautiously. "But therapy doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't change the fact that when I needed you, you weren't there. I know." His voice cracked. "And I know I don't deserve another chance. But I'm asking anyway. Not to go back to what we had, I don't want that either. But maybe we could try again. As who we really are, not who they expect us to be." He stood there in my half-empty living room, holding evidence of his father's fury, finally choosing his own path no matter the cost. A part of me was proud of him for walking away, for standing up, for beginning the painful process of change. But another part of me knew the truth. I wasn't the same woman who had left that restaurant in tears a month ago. I need time, I said softly. And I need to know this isn't just rebellion against your father, that it won't fade once the novelty wears off. He nodded. Take all the time you need. I'll be at my new job, figuring out who I am when no one else is telling me who to be. And maybe, if you decide you're willing, we can figure out who we are together. When he left, I sat among the boxes, the letter still in my hands. For the first time since that humiliating dinner, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't dared to let myself feel. Possibility. 3 days after I moved into my new house, a small velvet box appeared on my doorstep. No, just my name written in elegant script on a cream-colored card. Curious, I opened it and gasped. Inside was the most beautiful ring I'd ever seen. Not oversized or flashy, but delicate and timeless. A deep blue sapphire encircled by tiny diamonds, set in white gold that carried the soft patina of age. Clearly vintage. Clearly precious. Before I could even process it, my phone rang. Do you like it? The voice on the other end was his mother's. It's stunning, I admitted, staring at the way the stone caught the light. But I can't accept this. It's too much. It belonged to my grandmother, she said. She gave it to me when I was your age, newly married, still trying to find my place in a family that didn't want me. My husband hated it, said it wasn't impressive enough to represent our status. He wanted me to reset it with something larger, something showy. But I never did. It was the only piece I kept that was truly mine. Her voice cracked slightly. I've worn it 3 times in 32 years. Always when he wasn't around to sneer at it. I sat down heavily, the ring still open in my lap. Why give it to me? Because you did what I never could, she whispered. You walked away. You chose yourself over the cage they built. I want you to have it because it deserves to belong to a woman who refuses to be broken. And because I've started painting again. That surprised me. Painting? Yes, she said, a small laugh escaping. I was an art student before I married into his world. I gave it up when he told me it was frivolous. But after seeing me walk away, I dug out my brushes. I even signed up for classes at the community college. Twice a week. Nothing grand, but it feels like coming back to life. What does your husband think? I asked. He doesn't know yet. There was defiance in her voice. I'm not ready for that battle. But having something that's mine again, something he can't touch, it's terrifying and wonderful all at once. I slipped the sapphire ring onto my right hand. It fit as though it had been waiting for me all along. After we hung up, I looked around my half-furnished home. The boxes, the bare walls, the empty shelves, they didn't feel lonely anymore. They felt like a canvas, waiting for me to fill them with choices that were entirely mine. The reading nook by the window, where the morning sun would pour in. The kitchen counters, wide enough for new recipes and failed experiments alike. The backyard, where soon I'd plant tomatoes and herbs. This wasn't just a house. It was a declaration. A fresh start built on my own terms. That evening, I stood on the back porch, the sapphire glittering on my hand, gazing out at the little patch of yard that would soon bloom into my garden. For the first time in a long time, the future felt wide open, scary, yes, but mine. Entirely mine. 3 months into what Daniel and I cautiously called trying again, I learned that rebuilding trust is like tending a fragile garden. You plant seeds, water them, give them sunlight, but there are no guarantees they'll take root. We met twice a week for coffee. Always in neutral spaces, never at his apartment, never at my new house. It felt safer that way, as though the ghosts of our past arguments might suffocate anything tender before it could grow. He told me about his new job. about the strange, exhilarating freedom of making decisions without asking his father's opinion first, about colleagues who respected him simply because his ideas were good, not because of his last name. I told him about my garden, about how deeply satisfying it was to watch tomatoes sprout from seeds I planted with my own hands. We laughed about the birds stealing my strawberries and the mess I made trying to can pasta sauce for the first time, but the coffee shop conversations were the easy part. The real work happened in therapy. Dr. Martinez, our couples counselor, had a way of cutting through the polite surface we both tried to maintain. She asked questions that stripped us down, forcing us to confront the wounds we'd been tiptoeing around. "Tell me about trust," she said during one session. "What does it mean to each of you? And where did it break?" I looked Daniel straight in the eye. "I need to know that when someone humiliates me, you'll defend me. Not after the fact, not with excuses, but in the moment when it matters most." His jaw tightened. "And I need to know that she won't walk away the second things get hard. That she'll give me a chance to fix what I break instead of leaving at the first sign of trouble." My chest tightened. "Walking away wasn't giving up," I said quietly. Dr. Martinez leaned forward, her gaze sharp. "It was self-preservation. Can you see the difference?" The words hung in the air like a revelation neither of us had been willing to voice. For the first time, I saw Daniel's face soften with understanding. But it didn't erase the ache inside me. Outside of therapy, his father's disapproval still cast its long shadow. The phone calls came in waves. At first, friendly, "Let's work this out, come over for dinner, we can fix this." When those failed, they turned sharp, laced with disappointment and threats. Eventually, cruelty replaced persuasion. Carefully crafted words meant to undermine Daniel's confidence and drag him back into line. One afternoon, Daniel stirred his coffee absently, his voice low. "He's cutting me out of the will." Made sure his lawyer told me formally. I studied his face. "And how do you feel about that?" He let out a long breath. Relieved. Guilty for feeling relieved, but mostly relieved. I spent years living for that inheritance, for the security it promised. But what I never realized is that security built on someone else's control isn't security at all. It's a prison with golden bars. I reached across the table, squeezing his hand. For the first time, I saw him beginning to grasp what I'd known all along, that freedom and self-respect were worth more than any trust fund. Still, even as we worked through these breakthroughs together, something between us had shifted. The laughter we shared didn't flow as easily. The intimacy we once had felt cautious, almost rehearsed. Every touch, every conversation, every kiss carried an undercurrent of doubt on both sides. I found myself watching him too closely, analyzing instead of feeling. When he agreed with me, I wondered if it was genuine or just his old habit of avoiding conflict. When he smiled, I questioned whether it was real joy or performance, and deep down, a quiet truth kept whispering, some things once broken never return to what they were. The unraveling was slow, almost imperceptible at first, like a thread tugging loose from a sweater. But soon, the gaps became too obvious to ignore. We could talk about our jobs, about my students or his projects at the startup. We could sit across from each other in therapy, dissecting our hurts with clinical precision. We could even share quiet dinners where everything looked fine on the surface, but the intimacy, the ease, the uncheckable trust that once lived between us, it was gone. I caught myself holding back pieces of myself, keeping escape routes open as though bracing for disappointment. He tried harder and harder to prove he was reliable, to convince me he had changed, but the effort only made it feel less authentic, more like a performance. One evening, I admitted to my roommate what I'd been afraid to say aloud. I don't trust my own judgment anymore. I can't tell if I'm being unfairly suspicious, or if my instincts are protecting me from repeating the same mistake. She looked at me gently. Maybe both. Maybe some things just can't be unbroken. That truth settled heavy in my heart. Weeks later, I cooked him dinner at my house, a quiet Tuesday. Nothing special, just pasta from his grandmother's old recipe. It was the first time he'd been in my home since I'd moved. We ate in silence, making small talk about the weather, about work. Everything polite, everything safe, but beneath it, we both knew. Finally, I put my fork down. This isn't working. He didn't argue. He didn't beg or lash out. He just nodded, his shoulders sinking, relief and sorrow mixing in his expression. I know, he said softly. I've known for weeks. We're trying so hard to rebuild something, but it feels like a performance, not us. I love you, I need you to know that. But love isn't always enough, is it? Tears blurred my vision. No, sometimes love means knowing when it's over. We cried quietly together, grieving the life we had planned, mourning the versions of ourselves who once believed in it. There was no anger, no blame, just the sad honesty of two people acknowledging that the bond between them had been fatally cracked. I think I needed to lose you, he whispered, to finally stand up for myself. And maybe you needed to leave to realize you're strong enough on your own. We sat in silence, two parallel lines that had grown side by side but would never truly meet. When he left that night, we hugged a real embrace, one that honored what we'd shared without clinging to it. Thank you, he said at the door, for leaving when you did, for showing me courage I didn't have. Thank you, I whispered back, for finally standing up to him. And then it was over. Months passed. My little house became more than just walls and furniture. It became mine. The books on the shelves, the plants on the windowsill, the laughter of friends who visited, all of it reflected me. Not anyone else's approval. I poured myself into teaching. And in October, Mrs. Davidson called me into her office. I expected a routine check-in. Instead, she offered me a promotion, curriculum coordinator, more responsibility, more pay, and the chance to shape education across the district. You've shown remarkable resilience this year, she said, signing the papers. And your vision is exactly what we need. For the first time in my adult life, I had both security and freedom built entirely on my own. Dating came slowly after that. A coffee with the downtown librarian, dinner with my neighbor's brother. Nothing serious, just gentle reminders that I still had the right to choose what love should look like. And for the first time, I enjoyed deciding where to eat, what movie to watch, how to spend a Sunday afternoon. My garden flourished too. Tomatoes heavy on the vine, herbs filling the air with their fragrance. I canned sauce, gave jars to neighbors, and laughed when my first batch of bread burned. It was messy, imperfect, but entirely mine. His mother and I stayed in touch. She invited me to her first art show in decades, a small exhibition at the community center. Her watercolor landscapes glowed with color and emotion. I watched her beam as strangers admired her work. Afterward, over coffee, she told me I filed for separation. It's terrifying, but it's also freedom. I hugged her tightly. In her courage, I saw a mirror of my own. One December afternoon, I ran into Daniel at the coffee shop where we'd first met. We both reached for the same bag of holiday blend, and for a moment, time folded in on itself. You look happy, he said, and meant it. So do you, I replied. And it was true. He'd grown into himself at the startup, had found someone new, had finally cut ties with his father. We chatted politely, two people from the same book, just in different chapters now. Walking home, I realized something. There was no bitterness left. Just gratitude for the lessons, for the growth, for the courage to leave when staying would have broken me. That Christmas, I hung lights on my porch, the sapphire ring catching the glow. It wasn't a promise of forever. It wasn't tied to a man or a marriage. It was a reminder that I had chosen myself. The fairy tale I'd once clung to had shattered, but in its place I had written a better one. One where the heroine rescues herself, where strength and peace come not from someone else's approval, but from living authentically. And as I stood in my garden the following spring, hands in the soil, watching new life sprout from seeds I'd planted, I knew this was my happy ending, not a castle, not a crown, not a prince, just me, living a life that was finally beautifully mine.